Welcome to a sample of June's CGR 2085, the monthly classic game room podcast. This one is titled Record Collecting, the Vinyl Frontier, where I talk about LPs, records, and everything vinyl. I interview Jerry, owner of Jerry's Records, the greatest used record store in the world, about how to get started in LP collecting. I also talk with Metal Jesus Rocks from the YouTube channel Metal Jesus Rocks. And he's got great taste in music and Def Leppard. The CGR 2085 podcasts run monthly through Patreon at patreon.com/Classic Game Room, and they're one of the sweet perks that you get for backing Classic Game Room and funding the show. These are available at the Podcaster Warrior tier and higher. And this is just a sample of the full 50-minute plus podcast. CGR 2085, I've been doing them for a few months now. I think they're turning out really well, and the next one is all about the Sega Dreamcast, and we'll feature some special guests as well. So check it out, patreon.com/Classic Game Room. Enjoy this clip, and thank you. See you soon. And by the way, these are both really good records. Yes. Way back in 2009, I recorded a series of videos for YouTube called the CGR Edison Cylinder Show, where I simply played my grandfather's old collection of ancient Edison cylinders and recorded the sounds. Now these are way out of copyright. This one is probably pre-1920. It's one of my favorites, which is why I made it the theme song for this segment of videos, which you can still watch today. In fact, you should, just to give yourself an idea of what these things look like. Edison cylinders, which are also known as phonograph cylinders, mechanically recorded. These are the prequels to the modern LP, which has been around for quite some time now. One of the things I find fascinating about vinyl and about LP or records is that in an era when electronic devices go obsolete in like 2 years, there's still millions of us embracing this century-old audio format that plays giant spinning discs with needles. It's analog, and it's amazing. But why? Welcome to CGR 2085, the Classic Game Room podcast, where next month I'll start a trilogy of video game-themed podcasts, Atari 2600, NES, and Dreamcast. But this month I'm continuing my trip through Mark's favorite pop culture and media formats with record collecting, the vinyl frontier. I have some guests on this podcast. My dog, Stella, who's asleep at my feet. Metal Jesus from the YouTube show Metal Jesus Rocks. And Jerry of Jerry's Records in Pittsburgh, the greatest used record store in the universe. And all other universes, which haven't been discovered yet. They still don't have a record store as good as Jerry's. What year did Jerry's Records start?
1975.
And where did it start?
Started up on Forbes Avenue near North Craig. My buddy owned a bar, and he had a room upstairs, which he was paying the lady $75, or he was giving her $75 a month. Was nothing in it. I said, can I have that to open a record store? He said, give me my $75 a month, and you can have it.
Now, part of my podcast is talking about how vinyl is hotter than at least I've seen it in many decades. What changes have you seen in vinyl collecting in the past 40 years?
Well, the big change is no older people buy vinyl, period. Everybody between 55 and 75, they don't buy vinyl. It's all young people, and by young I mean from 14 to 45. Mm-hmm. There's some middle age, like guys like you in there too, you know. But it's just this huge change, because half of my store was geared to people who like Sinatra and Benny Goodman and big bands and pop music and classical music and ethnic music and polkas. I can't sell that stuff. I can't even give it away. So it's all young people. They want rock, they want rock, they want rock, they want rock, a little bit of reggae, a little bit of blues, more rock, a little bit of punk rock, a little bit of heavy metal, more rock. Since I started in 75, I've never stocked new records because I realize there's so many records out there that people don't want anymore for one reason or the other. So I had to find the people who do want them, and that's all I've ever done. Buy off people who don't want them, sell them to people who do want them.
Welcome to CGR 2085. Once again, it's Metal Jesus Rocks from Seattle.
Woohoo! I'm back.
What's up? How are you?
I am doing great. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm doing all right. I'm talking about record collecting, so that always puts me in a pretty good mood.
Oh my God! When you mentioned that you want to do a podcast about record collecting, first of all, I was like, I just wanted to start masturbating right there, but I was like, no, I'll wait till the podcast.
Oh, good. So,
Yeah.
So you just put a good image in everyone's mind. So you are a record collector as well.
Dude, I grew up in the era of vinyl, and my dad introduced me to vinyl, and I never looked back. I mean, even in the 90s when it wasn't really cool and I didn't have a record player anymore, you'd always look at that vinyl record and, kind of like an old girlfriend, and it's like, oh man, I miss you,
I grew up right at the end of when I think vinyl was kind of going out of vogue in the 80s. CDs were coming in. I grew up kind of in the cassette era. I'm a little bit younger than you, so I remember getting like Def Leppard and Whitesnake and Guns N' Roses and all that stuff on cassette. And then I went to CDs. But as I talk about in the podcast, I got into college radio in the 90s, and they had a room of vinyl. And I was like, oh, wait a second, I remember this stuff. And I haven't looked back since then. I'm not going to recommend that you go out and start collecting Edison cylinders, but it is fascinating that this was recorded over 100 years ago. And while it doesn't have that smooth sound that so many of us like about vinyl, it works in pretty much the same way. And I inherited all of these from my grandfather, who collected them for years. That's how I ended up with a nice collection of Edison cylinders, which I actually have packed away at the moment, or I would produce a few more of these for you. People ask me all the time about the basics of LP collecting, and there's no right or wrong way to do it, but you can definitely get a good starting setup and learn the basics for just a couple $100, if not less, depending on what you can find and what your budget is. What advice would you give to record collectors just starting out right now?
Don't buy new records. They're too expensive, especially young people. You can't afford them. Go to estate sales, not necessarily garage sales, yard sales or flea markets. They get picked over. There's a lot of guys that are baby boomers that are reaching their 70s that started collecting records back in the golden age of the 60s. So instead of going to a house where somebody's selling all the contents and finding Frank Sinatra and Glenn Miller and Mitch Miller and that kind of stuff, you're finding guys with real cool rock collections. So I'm finding that too when people call me, because it's a whole new market opening up. Buy your records there, because a lot of times if you see 5 records in a box and you say, how much for the whole box? The person from Idaho's there trying to empty out the house to sell it, and they'll say, oh, give me $20 for the whole box. So there you go. Yeah. You get, 80 records for $20, take what you want, and then try to sell the rest to me, But, that's where to go. Estate sales is where it's at now.
Over the years, do you have an estimate of how many records you've sold?
It's in the millions and millions. And that's just, I call it handling records. That means you bring records up the steps, I look at them, I pick which ones I want, I take them in here, I look at them again, I put them to be cleaned. When they're cleaned, I take them again, I price them, put them out, and then I sell them. So, each record gets handled about 5 times. And nobody done handle more records than me.
This is true. I've been buying from Jerry since I was in high school. 90% of my collection is probably from Jerry's. Turntables are, for the most part, pretty accessible. They're easy to find out there, but like a lot of old school electronics or old school mechanical devices, they can have problems. And I'm not a very technical person, so I don't know anything about getting old stuff and fixing it. That's not my area of expertise. However, let me get started by telling you what I use, because I have a good entry-level setup that I've been using for well over 10 years now. My turntable is a Rega P3, and that's R-E-G-A, which is a good entry-level, mid-level turntable. I have an Ortophone OM30 cartridge, which is an important piece of record playing. You'll need a cartridge, and you don't want to skimp on that, but you don't want to overspend either. I'm using a fairly basic phono preamp, and you need a phono preamp because unlike CD players or DVD players or even your Sega Genesis, the turntable will not output a line level signal, so your phono preamp will boost it so that it sounds good when being played by your amplifier and speakers. I've been using a used Creek OB8H SE for years. It's nothing fancy, but it does sound better than a lot of other built-in phono preamps, and I'll get to some of this stuff later. Those are your three main ingredients: turntable, cartridge, which is the thing that holds the needle, and phono preamp. From there, you need an amplifier or an integrated amplifier and speakers, or just a good stereo, and wars have been started over what speakers are best, so I'm not really going to go there except to say that I use Mackie Studio monitors, which come with built-in amplifiers, and that really simplifies things. Also, they sound great. The good thing about speakers is they'll last pretty much forever, so that's good. So will a turntable, if treated correctly. That's one reason vinyl is better than listening to music from your iPhone or whatever, because that thing will be dead probably by the end of this podcast. Your turntable can entertain your grandchildren. There's just something special about records.
There's a magic to it, and there's a lot of things that are really great about vinyl that other formats have not been able to reproduce. And I think for me, one of my favorite things about vinyl is that it marries perfectly audio, and often it's like great audio, like audiophile quality audio, but then also art and artwork and lyrics. And, it used to be back that when you were a band or a musician, you had the entire package. Yes, you would put out hopefully a great album, but then you would have an amazing album cover, and then you would have all this space, like with the gatefold, to perhaps have it fold open and be this extra stuff that you could kind of jump into that world of that album and lyrics. And I don't know about you, man, but I used to nerd out on like who made the album, who wrote the songs. You know what I mean? Like where was it recorded? Where was it mastered? I used to love all that stuff.
Well, you got me into disco and funk, so thank you.
Disco and funk is some of the hottest music there ever was, and it still is, because people can dance to it. And even though, they laugh about their disco days when they have reunions and parties and stuff and getting together with some people, they want some of them disco records because you're drinking beer and stuff, You don't want to listen to James Taylor, really. You want to listen to something that hopefully the girls will dance to, and the young people. If it's got the beat, they can dance to it. They don't have to be somebody new. We get into that. And old people, too. You put on Michael Jackson and watch the old people, Thriller or one of them, and watch them stomp their feet,
I'm still looking for, every time I come in here, you're always sold out of Thriller and any Depeche Mode.
Depeche Mode. Thriller, you wouldn't believe what goes through here in a week. On a normal week, 5 to 7 copies. But like I say, that and Off the Wall, and the other one right after that, Bad, I guess. Those three move real fast. And but Depeche Mode, just think about one thing. You like Depeche Mode, right?
Well, I like 80s synth pop. I grew up in the MTV day, like 81, 82.
Right. But see, even if you decide to sell some of your records, you'd keep Depeche Mode, because you'll probably never get them back on vinyl with the extended mixes and the live version on the other side, so they would sell the record with 3 cuts on it. You would keep them. You might get rid of some other stuff. Well, that's the same thing. Most of the people who have Depeche Mode, OMD, the Cure and all that stuff. The Cure never comes in here. The Smiths never come in here. A lot of that stuff just don't come in here because they either keep it or they sell it on the internet for 20, 30, 40 and up. And that's killed a lot of my new stuff, you know.
Well,
newer stuff.
I bought all my Van Halen, all my Duran Duran from you, all my The Fix.
Well, you look familiar. I've seen you around, you know. So, yeah, that's Van Halen, they come in. And Duran Duran, they come in too. It's like I say, people who have Human League, Duran Duran, Thompson Twins, they sell them.
Yeah.
They won't sell their Depeche Mode. I'm serious, they won't.
Well, why do you think that vinyl has seen such a resurgence in the past 10 years or so?
Yeah, that's a really good question because I didn't expect it. And while I love that sort of stuff, you know, I mean, 10 years ago, you couldn't give away vinyl. You used to go to go to garage sales and people would be like, please take my box of vinyl. And so it is wild that it's kind of come back. And I think it's for a number of reasons. It's the same reason why retro games have come back, is because there is something to be said for actually owning the thing that you love. You know what I mean? And yes, we can get MP3 versions of these songs, and yes, we can stream them immediately from Spotify or whatever, but you don't own it. And vinyl allows you to do that. And I think that it's, in many ways, I think it's the ultimate way to own a record. And what's cool about vinyl too, as you know, it's been around for 100 years. And it's very possible that you could go out and buy a record that was made 100 years ago. And if it was taken care of, you can play it on a turntable today and it'll sound good. And so if you buy a brand new record today and you take care of it, 100 years from now, you could still play that exact record. You could own it. And that's pretty cool.
But yeah, I've been amazed at actually how good some Edison cylinders and just old 100, 110-year-old recordings have sounded.
Yeah, and specifically, you know, when you get into the late 60s, the 70s, and the 80s, whenever that was the pinnacle of vinyl technology, essentially, that those records today, if you clean them, if you demagnetize those records, they sound just as good today.
Yeah. Do you have any like tips for people just getting into record collecting? One of the things I'm trying to do with this podcast is give people some advice on turntables and equipment and where to shop for vinyl. Like, what would you say?
He was a real cool guy, and he started buying all of my Human League and Thompson Twins and Men at Work, all that stuff. If I had 10 copies of them, and a lot of them I did, he'd buy all 10. And he spent quite a lot of money on a lot of records. I was really happy to see, because I had more of them in the warehouse and there was more of them coming in the door all the time. But I got to know him pretty good. We had a few beers and stuff together. And he told me that in downtown Singapore, where the nightclub district is, there's 15 nightclubs, and all of them play just exactly what he was buying, 80s dance music. And he said they're all packed every night, and they're packed 365 days a year. They all play the same thing, but there's so much desire for this music. I can't imagine. Imagine going down to a nightclub district, and every place you walk into, you hear like, "Don't you want me, baby," or something, you know? And I said, "You're serious?" He goes, "Yeah, they don't take chances. They play what everybody wants." So that's amazing to me. Just goes to show me, which I've known all along, there's somewhere in the world where everybody finds a place for some music, you know, especially if you can dance to it.